Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The subject concerning Zionism is a subject that requires an extensive analysis and an evaluation. After the October 7th attack, Western leaders like President Joe Biden, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and French President Emmanuel Macron were quick to condemn Hamas. At times, they even compared Hamas to the terrorist organization Daesh. Let us understand the foundational premise and basis of Zionism. So in the 1940s, long before Palestinian resistance groups even were born, like Hamas, the Fatah, we had Jewish militias and Zionist terrorist organizations that picked up arms and killed British officials and Palestinian Arabs. I'll give you a few examples. We had the terrorist organizations Haganah, Irgun, Stern Gang, also known as Lehi, that actively used terrorism against the British mandate over Palestine and to create fear amongst Arab citizens. In October 1945, Jewish underground groups simultaneously targeted colonial railways, oil refineries, police boats in Palestine, and this marked the beginning of a very turbulent 2-year period where a number of terrorist attacks were perpetrated. There are many academicians, politicians, and human rights organizations quick at condemning Palestinians. However, if we study history, we see a very different reality. In July 1946, Irgun, a Zionist terrorist organization led by Menachem Begin, who later on becomes the Prime Minister of Israel, this terrorist organization blew up the King David Hotel in Jerusalem, where the British administration headquarters were located, killing 92 people, including British diplomats. Further than that, on April 9, 1948, Irgun and Lehi militants, again Zionist fundamentalist organizations, jointly committed the Deir Yassin massacre of at least 107 Palestinian villagers, including women and children. Deir Yassin was a Palestinian village of around 600 people near Jerusalem. Why? In order to scare the Palestinian Arabs, in order to expel them from their homes. And this is exactly what Ben Gurion says in his works, that we need to transfer the Arabs, we need to expel the Arabs. In fact, till today, if you go to Jerusalem, you will see a mass grave of 104 victims killed by Irgun, a Zionist terrorist organization. And there were female victims, there were children, pregnant women who were also killed. Now imagine the irony. Before the creation of Israel, Menachem Begin was the leader of this Zionist terrorist organization, Irgun. He went on to create the Likud party. You know Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel? Guess which party is from? The Likud party. Originally, it was a Zionist militant organization. And he became, Menachem Begin, the 6th Prime Minister of Israel. Now Albert Einstein, famous scientist, he authored an open letter to the New York Times in 1948. And he criticized Menachem Begin's Herut, so-called Freedom Party, because he orchestrated the Deir Yassin massacre. You know what he said? He said, Menachem Begin's Herut, their party, they are terrorist bands. And they are like the Nazis and fascist parties. Imagine Albert Einstein is likening a Zionist militant terrorist organization to the Nazis and fascists. If you say this today, you are an anti-Semite. But Albert Einstein says this in an open letter to the New York Times. He says today, they speak of freedom, democracy, and anti-imperialism. It is in its actions that the terrorist party betrays its real character. And he calls Irgun a right-wing, terrorist, chauvinist organization. MI5, British intelligence, actually revealed reports that there were Jewish terrorist organizations, Zionist militant groups, plotting to assassinate Winston Churchill while he was fighting Adolf Hitler. A man called Eliyahu Bedzuri of the Stern Gang proposed Churchill's assassination whilst the Nazis were fighting Winston Churchill. However, both plots were thwarted. But again, these folks were actually under the British terror watch list. Menachem Begin, Irgun, Stern Gang, they were all considered terrorists by the United Kingdom. Further than that, let's fast forward to 1967. In June 1967, during the Six-Day War, the USS Liberty, a US spy ship, was attacked by Israeli forces, and 34 crew members and numerous injuries occurred. So imagine Israel attacked a US ship despite having intelligence and reports that this is a US ship. They were told this is a US ship. What did the Israeli force say? Doesn't matter, hit her. Despite flying an American flag and being unmistakably identified, the Liberty was targeted with airstrikes and torpedo boats. So again, Israel has not only killed British diplomats in the 40s, they have killed American Marines in 1967. Let's fast forward. 2008. Israel broke a ceasefire agreement and initiated Operation Cast Lead. This resulted in the deaths of 350 Palestinian children. Operation Cast Lead. 2014, Israel launched Operation Protective Edge. 550 Palestinian children lost their lives. When people say this started on October 7th, that is beyond reality. This has been going on for many years, and multiple operations such as these have been launched by Israeli forces, where they have targeted civilians with impunity. They use dumb bombs, imprecise bombs, and they fire indiscriminately towards civilian areas and civilian populations. Various international bodies like the United Nations, Amnesty International, Geneva Conventions, Human Rights Watch, they have stated that Israel illegally occupies Gaza. And they have been occupying Gaza for decades. In fact, former Israeli PM Ariel Sharon called it an occupation. This occupation has resulted in Israel controlling all aspects of the lives of Palestinians in Gaza. Their access to food, access to water, the population registry, and even electricity. In fact, they would close down the electricity, shut down electricity for 20 hours a day. At one point, Israel imposed severe electricity cuts in Gaza. Prior to October 7th, 70%, this is before October 7th, 70% of Gaza's population lacked access to clean water, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis in the region. Now, in response, people normally say, why didn't they organize peaceful protests? Why don't they organize rallies in order to condemn Israeli forces? They did. In 2018, 2019, peaceful protests. What did Israel do? They responded by killing and murdering 189 Palestinians and injuring thousands. They would target people's legs. And investigations reveal they targeted children, medical personnel, doctors, and journalists. B'Tselem, an Israeli human rights group, has highlighted Israel's extensive control over Gaza, stating throughout all of these years, Israel has continued to control nearly every aspect of life in Gaza from outside. So they are illegal occupiers. Now, keep aside Gaza. In the West Bank, according to the United Nations, 700,000 illegal settlers are living illegally in the occupied West Bank. In 2023 alone, there's no Hamas control in the West Bank. More than 100 Palestinian children have been killed in the West Bank. You're telling me this is all about Hamas. Why are children being killed in the West Bank? Former US President Jimmy Carter, a friend of Israel, he called Israel an apartheid state. Because even Israeli officials, they tell you that there are different laws for Palestinians and Israelis in the West Bank. They have control over Gaza. In Jerusalem, it's also occupied territory. And there are different laws for Palestinians and for Israelis. So it is an apartheid state. Further than that, former UK Prime Minister David Cameron, he called Gaza the largest open-air prison because of Israel's illegal occupation. Now, currently we have the mass slaughter in Gaza, the genocide, the ethnic cleansing. A CNN report reveals that Israeli troops desecrated and bulldozed dead bodies and shot civilians at the Kamal Adwan hospital. The Washington Post, again these are Western media outlets. The Washington Post exposed the fact that Israel lied when they claimed Al-Shifa hospital had a Hamas command base. You know, they said command and control center. It was a lie. Guess what happened? There were babies in their incubators. They died and decomposed as a result. The New York Times uncovered, you know how we hear this? Israeli officials constantly tell us that no, we tell the civilians to go. We tell the civilians to leave before bombing. Guess what? The New York Times revealed that Israel tells Palestinians to move into safe zones and then proceeds to bomb these very safe zones. According to the US Department of Justice, the US State Department and the Pentagon, thousands of children have been killed in Israel, 14,000 to be precise. In 2004, there was a report that an Israeli army officer repeatedly shot a 13-year-old Palestinian girl. And they wondered that this girl is a child. Why are you shooting the child? You know what he says? This is an Israeli soldier. He says, I'd have shot her even if she were a 3-year-old girl. So this is the ideology. Netanyahu has made it clear that we are fighting Amalek. In the Bible it says that Amalek needs to be wiped off the face of this earth, including women, children and animals. So he cited Amalek. The Israelis have made it very clear. President Isaac Herzog, the president of Israel, what does he say? There are no innocent civilians in Gaza. Ben-Gvir, this guy, before even becoming the national security minister of Israel, he had a portrait of Baruch Goldstein. This man was a terrorist. He killed 29 Palestinian worshippers. Ben-Gvir had a portrait of Baruch Goldstein in his living room. I'll end my talk with this harrowing, detailed report of Hind Rajab. Hind Rajab was a 6-year-old girl. She was trying to escape from an Israeli tank. In her car, she was strapped in her car and she was trying to escape. What did she do? She called the Palestinian Red Cross that I want to leave. There's an Israeli tank near me. And even satellite imagery, phone records confirm that there were Israeli troops near Hind's family car. What happened? These Israeli tanks, they shot this girl, they killed this girl, and the medics, the doctors who came to rescue Hind Rajab, they were also targeted in this targeted assassination. In conclusion, Zionism, the foundational premise of Zionism is terrorism. Whether we study Irgun, Haganah, Lehi, Stern Gang, all of these Zionist militant organizations targeted civilians with impunity, and they killed British diplomats in the 1940s. In 1967, Israeli forces killed 34 US Marines in the 1967 USS Liberty attack. 2008, they murdered 350 Palestinian children. 2014, 550 Palestinian children were killed by Israeli forces, Operation Protective Edge, and this hasn't stopped. So therefore we pray for peace to prevail in Palestine. We pray for peace and justice to prevail because the Holy Prophet has said that peace will only prevail, harmony will only come when the Mahdi reappears and he will establish peace and justice on this earth. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.